Beware, Azov Battalion, the supposed heroes may now bring terror back to their masters, especially in the USA. And welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Atul Mishra. Let's begin. If you're riding a tiger, keep riding, and feeding those who can consume you is dangerous. Even if temporarily satisfied, they'll seek to consume you again and again. It has been documented that the US has frequently been seen feeding snakes that later betrayed the country. The Taliban's ascent in Afghanistan has been attributed largely to the United States of America. In order to fight the Soviet Union, the US initially supplied the Mujahids with weapons and training in the late 1990s. As a result, the Taliban and Mujahideen were able to seize control of a large portion of Afghanistan and install a fundamentalist Islamic government. The US also provided financial support to the Taliban during the period of their government in Afghanistan, including military and economic aid. This enabled the Taliban to maintain their control over large parts of the country and to enforce their harsh interpretation of Islamic law. Then the 9/11 attack happened, and so the US realized that the Taliban they created has turned into the Frankenstein's monster. The US also did not initially recognize the severity of Hitler's actions and intentions when he was spreading havoc in Europe. It was only after the invasion of Poland in September 1939 and the subsequent declaration of war by the UK and France that the gravity of the situation became clear. In 2023, history is repeating itself all over again. Remember the so-called Azov Battalion, of which several prisoners of war were killed by the Ukrainian missile strike, now appears to be spreading ruckus in the USA. A terror conspiracy has been foiled in Baltimore, Maryland. Reportedly, a conspiracy to stage a terrorist attack in the city was foiled by American authorities, and the conspirators were connected to the Ukrainian Azov Battalion. However, connections between the Azov Battalion and the conspirators are conspicuously absent from US liberal media's coverage of this story. The conspirators named Sarah Beth Clendaniel and Brandon Clint Russell were charged with conspiring to destroy energy substations in Baltimore by the US Justice Department. According to authorities, the duo's plans were driven by the ideology of racially motivated hatred. Each of them could receive a 20-year sentence if found guilty. The two planned a series of attacks against substations beginning in June 2022, though possibly earlier, using balloons and rifle fire in an effort to shoot out power transformers and rob thousands of residents of light and heat. When the grid was under stress and energy demand was at its peak, they specifically intended to carry out this terror attack. Russell founded Atomwaffen Division, an international neo-Nazi terrorist organization based on the ideologies of Azov Battalion Group, which is also known as the National Socialist Resistance Front. He was imprisoned in January 2018 for illegally storing explosives and possessing an unregistered destructive device. Prosecutors allege that an FBI bomb technician planned to use the material in terrorist attacks across the US against civilians, nuclear facilities, and synagogues. He claimed the material was sufficient to completely destroy an airliner. In addition, the attempted terrorist attack might only be the beginning of the Azov members and their foreign allies' threat to Western nations. It is quite surprising and remarkable that the mainstream liberal media and US politicians have both largely ignored the federal busting of a domestic terror plot involving high-ranking members of a group that's clearly pose a serious threat to public safety. The administration of President Joe Biden has actively promoted the danger posed by racially motivated extremism, yet he has not discussed anything about this expose. The reason behind this is pretty obvious. Biden himself praised Azov Battalion earlier. Now, how can he suddenly go against them? Given the Azov Battalion's neo-Nazi connections, both Canada and the US had once declared that they won't recognize the Azov terrorists. Representative Max Rose was one of the 40 US congressmen who signed a letter in October 2019 urging the US State Department to label Azov as a foreign terrorist organization, but their request was unsuccessful. Representative Alyssa Slotkin made the same request to the Biden administration in April of last year, along with other organizations. Social media and internet was filled with media reports that the Azov Battalion is a neo-Nazi group, which is illegitimate and wrong. However, after the Ukraine war, things took a 180-degree turn. West started garnering widespread international support for Azov's social media platforms to tweak their policy to support the Azov's ideologies. The Azov Battalion has now become West's most crucial weapon against Russia. It has a sophisticated force and is also in possession of lethal weapons. Zelensky has officially merged Azov fighters into the Ukrainian army, so it wouldn't be wrong to claim Azov Battalion is now the Ukrainian army. And the man who is connected to the Ukrainian army was ready to carry out terrorist activities in the USA, leaving thousands, possibly millions, without power and even life. It is a dark and open secret that Azov fighters have a Nazi mindset, and this is why Russia, in its invasion, addressed for the denazification of Ukraine. But more than Ukraine or Russia, Europe needs to worry about terror attacks by Azov Battalion, as it is being predicted they are next. In July 2022, Europol had already predicted that the Ukraine war could lead to an increase in the trafficking of firearms and munitions into the EU via established smuggling routes or online platforms, which will eventually lead to rise in terror and criminal activities. It was also cautioned that this threat might even be higher once the conflict has ended. Since then, there have been numerous claims that criminal elements in Kiev have been using the weapons that were sent there to sell them on the black market. For the US and EU countries, the massive influx of extremist elements joining or training with the Azov Battalion and the large number of weapons being sent to Ukraine, many of which are unaccounted for, should be very concerning. The atom weapon plot in Baltimore might just be the tip of the iceberg. There are no strict laws or border checks for Ukrainians entering the EU's territory. Consequently, this begs the question of where the weapons are being used and precisely who is a terrorist posing as a regular migrant. The West might once again find itself in a catch-22 situation. They will be caught in a situation where moving in either direction would be disastrous, while arming them will only increase their potential as a threat. Leaving the Azov Battalion completely will ensure that the US and Azovs are at odds, ushering in a new era of terror. Biden and his Western buddies created a mess of a situation. Seriously, they should have avoided lending a helping hand to these anarchists. The Western countries got so blinded by their ambition to destroy Russia that they did not realize they were nurturing a monster in the name of Azovs.